nothing I can do, nothing old or nothing new that could earn salvation for my sinful soul. For God sees through eyes of grace, past my sins and my mistakes, and offers me his gift of love to make me whole. Nothing more will buy my pardon, nothing more than I can do. Not good deeds that I have done, not the honors I have won. It's not from those who've gone before, it's God's grace and nothing more. When my time on earth is past, and I reach my home at last, and I come into the presence of the Lord, I will never cease to raise songs of joy and endless praise, for I have entered by his grace and nothing more. Nothing more will buy my pardon, nothing more than I can do. Not good deeds that I have done, it's not the honors I have won, it's not from those who've gone before, it's God's grace and nothing more. Not good deeds that I have done, not the honors I have won, it's not from those who've gone before, it's God's grace and nothing more.
Thank you. Nothing more than God's grace. What a massive statement, massive statement. We are here today to honor the lives, commemorate and celebrate the lives of Jack and John Pimm. My name is Dave Moffat. I am the brother-in-law of Jack and John, and it's been my privilege to get to be related to them. And what a fine time. This is an unusual kind of thing to have a twin service like this. We have been fighting through the details of the COVID problem, the pandemic, and it has just rearranged everybody's life. And so thank you for being here today, that eventually we get to have this moment together. This is a time where we seek healing in the presence of God. There are a couple of things that help with the grief process. One is memories, and the other is hope. And we'll have a chance to share some memories a little bit here. And later, there'll be a reception, I understand. There'll be an opportunity for an open mic if you have stories you'd like to share. And when you share the stories, the person becomes so vivid and so powerful once again. And it helps us get through the moment of loss to remember the significance of the lives of both Jack and John. Scripture, Malia says, read this 20th chapter, verse 7 of Proverbs. The righteous walk in integrity. Happy are the children who follow them. And Annie says, read the 121st Psalm. This is on John's tombstone, by the way. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made the heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this day on and forevermore. We celebrate the keeping that God gives us. Let's open in prayer, shall we? Lord God, in this sacred place, we become conscious of your presence. We rely upon you in so many ways. We thank you for the lives of these brothers, Jack and John, and the difference they have made in our lives. We thank you for your presence here and pray that we will be touched, that people will receive the healing that you offer and know that you take care of that which we cannot take care of. We thank you for eternity, the gift of Jesus, and that security that we feel forever. Bless now this time of memory and memorial. In Jesus we pray. Amen. Okay. Reading the obituary will be Jack and John's sister, who just happens to be my wife, Linda. I remembered the name. That was good.
So I had the time to rewrite Jack's according to how my memory serves. But I didn't quite get John's rewritten. It's in tiny print, and so who knows what will happen there. Jack was my oldest brother. He was born in, I believe, Jerome, Idaho. He was the first son of Richard and Doris Pimm, born on May 17, 1948. They lived there together in a half of an old barracks that Mom and Dad moved from an internment camp up the road onto a piece of unimproved land. And by unimproved, it was. I went back to visit it. Still looks unimproved to me. Rock, and I don't mean stones, I mean rocks and sagebrush. And they tried to grow onions and potatoes, beans and peas. And I often have wondered if maybe this is where Jack came up with his aversion to onions. When Jack was about 3, they all moved back to the Willamette Valley, first to Brownsville, then to the place in Peoria. Jack attended Central in high school, and I think he went to class, but that wasn't what he was there for. He had to be there because Mom said so and Dad said so, but his friends were there. And he made lifelong friends. People like Darwin Pearl, Joe Tuma, Frank McCullough, and the Sade twins, and a bunch of others that go unnamed, but all through the years, those fellows have stuck together. In the late 60s, Jack and Joe Tuma had the wonderful foresight to go in the Army during the Vietnam War. They were saved, however, by my mother's prayer. Mother was They call them prayer warriors now. Well, Jack, and if you know Jack, this is so unlike him, he ended up spending his years in the service as basically a secretary clerk and driver for his commanding officer. The least likely thing I would have ever thought Jack would end up doing. And that was a result, I am convinced, of my mother's prayer. When he returned home from the service, Jack began attending Lane Community College, something to do with mechanics. And I remember, I believe it was Joe Tuma and a few other fellows got either an apartment or a house together. And what I truly remember, besides them working at the gas station with the big orange pumpkin outside, they used to fix their motorcycles in the living room. Somewhere pretty soon after that, Jack moved back home and began to court Bonnie. And you're going to have to ask Bonnie, be sure to ask her the stories about, it was something about in the middle of the night sneaking across the fields and through the barbed wire fences, something or other about that. But he ended up marrying her. Now, he married her regardless of the fact that she had a pet goat. And he took the pet goat to the family home, the family farm, and I remember being astonished about this because Jack wasn't really an animal lover. And the goat liked to stand on the hoods of the farm trucks. This was unusual at our house. Together, Bonnie and Jack farmed in the Willamette Valley for all these years. They birthed and raised 3 sons, Casey, Eric, and Rick, each of whom Jack was terribly proud, right down to the last day. They and their wives and children and a whole herd of grandchildren survived Jack. Jack loved and enjoyed many, many things in life, including God and salvation and farming and family. You notice I'm not claiming any order here. He loved cheeseburgers. He loved visiting with people. He was our family historian, and that is one other reason for greatly missing him, because he knew everything about anyone. He also knew everything about you. And he was a wonderful storyteller. He loved driving that tractor. He would plow and plow. He liked to plow at night. And until the field was finished, he didn't just start and then take a rest. He plowed. And when he was done plowing, he plowed more. Not long before his passing, he explained that we should bury him in his Bearcat Steiger on the back side of the place near Muddy Creek. The family made a different decision, however, because they weren't done with the tractor. Before cancer overtook him, and it took it a long time, boy, he was a tough one. Jack enjoyed singing as a worship team leader in his Brownsville Baptist Church. He looked forward to being in heaven with his buddies, You know, I think there were 5 of them that had cancer altogether. Guys that all were in high school at the same time, who all were on the track team at the same time. And they died within a very short amount of time, but he was the last one. Dean Sade, his special buddy, went before him, and Jack figured that as soon as he got to heaven, it would be okay because Dean would have the fishing holes scouted out by that time. Because of the COVID-19 thing, we couldn't have a family funeral for Jack. And this was indeed weird for us because memorials and funerals are an important part of our family culture. So, Eric, his middle son, cut down a tree and had it milled. And his youngest son, Rick, and his son, Glenn, constructed a coffin, a real simple box. And all the grandkids wrote notes to Grandpa and drew pictures on the coffin. And they took him up to the Oakville Cemetery, where he is buried. There are so many more things to say about Jack, but that's all I'm going to say right now. Now, you probably know that if Jack was this, John was that. There were 2.5 years difference in their age, 3 years difference in their age. And Jack got along with livestock like, well, he didn't. He liked to herd cows with a vehicle and a horn and flashing lights. John, on the other hand, was an animal mesmerizer. He started bottle feeding lambs when he was 3 or 4 years old. I remember Grandpa Pimm, that would have been Frank Pimm, brought the first lambs. And John, Mom showed him how, and he fed them with a bottle. And their tails would go, and they'd knock him down, and all was good. That was in Brownsville. And then we moved to over by Peoria, where John went to school at Shed School and then at Central Inn School. And he, like Jack, was not in love with school, but he went. He did his duty, but he seemed to live for when he would get home at night and he could work with his calves. And by the time he was at about 12, he had his own little herd, and he took care of me and he took care of the calves. He went through Central Inn High School as a long runner. He tried on the track team, and he was a long runner. Jack was a sprinter. He was a wrestler, and he sang, and he had a nice tenor voice. He sang in the Blue Notes. And I remember riding to and from Blue Notes with Ron Stenson and a few other kids. We lived a fair way away from the school, but Tuesdays and Thursdays. Then, let's see. Jack was famous for running his truck into a bridge. He was hauling a big cultivator or something or other, and he had to go to the bathroom, and he forgot that the cultivator in the truck was higher than would go under the bridge, and he got caught under the bridge, and all of the emergency vehicles had to come. And in this little town somewhere in Montana, he was in the newspaper because of it. They eventually got the cultivator out, I guess, in boxes, in pieces, and brought it on home. But that was one of those things where Jack and John worked together, because John had worked hard to prepare this cultivator to come down home. Anyway, it arrived home. John became famous, though, I remember, when his bull got loose at the state fair in Salem and ran clear from the fairgrounds, clear to where the traffic at Market Street goes into the freeway. And he ran through every clothesline in every yard in between. It was really a nice bull, but that was one of the highlights I remember of his younger life. Later on, John married and had a house full of wonderful kids, all of whom are here today, except for one. We're missing Malia. A lot of complications about the COVID thing and getting across the border. And you can get across the border, but the big question is, how do you get back? And that's still going on. So Malia met with us at a big memorial service up there in Canada. John lived near Edmonton for a number of years, and he and his wife and children started there. Then he moved down to Milk River, which is just above the U.S. border, but they still have 40 degree below zero nights in the winter. And he continued to raise cattle through all of that. He loved his cows, but he loved his kids more. He raised wonderful kids, as did Jack. And I'm proud that they're my nieces and nephews, and now they all have kids and all of that. He had a church, he had a faith, he had a rich and wonderful life. And he and Jack were so different from one another, and yet in the end came together. I want to thank you for coming today to remember him, to remember the two of them. You honor our family with your presence. Thank you.
You would think she was related to them. Thank you, dear. Time for a little music. When the roll is called up yonder, somebody's doing this, would you please come forward and let's do a little praise music together.
We're going to be singing When the Roll is Called Up Yonder. Please feel free to join us. This is in your Melodies of Praise book in front of you on page 182. When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, and time shall be no more, and the morning breaks eternal, bright and fair. When the saved of earth shall gather over on the other shore, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll yonder. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. On the bright and cloudless morning, when the dead in Christ shall rise, and the glory of his resurrection share. When his chosen ones shall gather to their home beyond the skies, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. Let us labor for the Master from the dawn till setting sun. Let us talk about his wondrous love and care. When all of life is over and our work on earth is done, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there.
They said, yeah. That's biblical term, I'm sure. All right. Now that's music. That's me. Thank you so much. Wonderful music today. Wonderful. Sharing now. Probably putting a few claw marks in this pulpit will be Eric coming up to share us a little about memories of Dad. Come on, Eric. Yeah, all right.
Well, I had somebody who wanted to come with me for moral support. He might actually do a better job than me, but we'll give it a whirl here. Of course, Jack was my dad. My brothers and I learned a lot from him because he was our dad. We certainly love him and miss him. I thought I'd talk a little bit about what we did learn from him and what a good man he was. He doesn't have any sons that are lazy, I don't think. From time to time, we might want a little rest here and there, but overall, we all know how to work. And I've never met anybody that worked harder than my dad, Jack. Day and night, he loved to plow a field, like Aunt Hum said. And when he got it plowed, he wouldn't stop. He'd go get the harrow, and he loved to harrow all night. And he loved to, there's a threat of rain coming. We got to get all the fields harrowed. And we're not stopping till it's done. He taught us to play too, but the play usually involved some kind of work. One of the few things that we did for fun when we were kids is Dad bought three-wheelers, which apparently we all survived it. I have a few creaks and groans probably because of it, fallen off a few times, more than I'd like, but I think my brothers have too. I remember we had like 2 three-wheelers, and I wasn't allowed to ride one yet, and we were neighbors with Mac and Carroll Canal, and we went to the sand dunes at Florence for the first time. And we got there, and it was 8 or 9 in the morning, and Dad saw that big sand dune right at the parking lot that they call the wall, and all we had was little 110 three-wheelers. Not very big or fast. Kind of beat you up, no suspension. And he couldn't get that three-wheeler unloaded fast enough, which I'd really never seen him react that way before to something that was supposed to be fun, right? He couldn't get that thing unloaded fast enough. Mac didn't have his off his trailers yet, and Dad got the first one off, and we got it started. He goes, Eric, get on the back of this thing with me. And he takes off, and he's going to climb that wall, and we get about a quarter of the way up. And he goes, lean to the side. And I leaned to the side and kind of fell off, and the bike went like this. Dad went the other way, and, well, okay, we got to do it a little different. Get back on. We got it started again. We rolled that thing 4 times before we finally drove back to the parking lot, and he goes, Mac, how do you do this? I can't quite figure out how to get that thing up there without flipping it over backwards. But we had a lot of good times doing that. Not the flipping part, but one time, I think it was the Crawfords' yard. There was a big walnut tree, and that was where our shop was. And so us kids were over there working all the time, and we'd play with the Crawford kids from time to time. And we found a rope in the barn, and we were trying to make a zip line out of that walnut tree. Dad said, well, I have a good idea. And I think he told Stan, the hired man, Stan Kuzik, hook that to the 40-30 and string it over the next tree, get that rope tight and put it in park. That'll hold it. Boy, us kids had a great time zip lining. Tree to tree. At the very end, we'd get to the ground. But that was the best playground I had that I remember as a kid. There's a lot of memories in work with Dad. Like I say, he taught us how to work. He was so committed to teaching us and teaching his grandkids. My oldest son, Zion, is special needs. Boy, he wanted to teach him how to drive a combine. And at the time, we had old Masseys. I think we'd got a couple of newer models of New Hollands at that time, but he decided Zion was old enough, and I said, yeah, I think he is, but you got to stay with him. You can't just leave him, because this could get exciting. And at the time, he was sick with cancer, and he hadn't had any treatments for a while, and he was good enough, and I just said, you take him out, and this is your field, and this is your combine, and you take Z, and you just do it at your pace. We'll give you a seed truck, and you do your thing, and it's all right. If you don't get it done, don't worry about it. We'll come back and finish up the field with the crew. But you guys have fun and learn how to do it. And he got a lawn chair, and that summer he set it on top of that combine in the heat and got Zion to drive in that combine, and that was him and Zion's field. And they combined that together. And you know, I'm sad to say I sold that combine this year, and Zion was real upset. And I said, well, man, we don't have a place to park it anymore, and we don't use that one anymore. And so I gave him a new one, but he'll always remember Grandpa sitting on the lawn chair on top of that thing in the dust and dirt and heat, and Zion down in the cab because they both wouldn't fit, learning how to drive that thing. Aunt Hum, you said he didn't get along with animals very well. One night we were rounding up the crew, shutting them down, all the combines, and we got a call, and Grandpa was fairly famous for not having premium livestock fencing. So I've tried to mend my ways on that in the community, building better fences. I started out not so good, but Dad had that new red Ford pickup. I think it was a 87 or, yep. And he was so proud of that thing. Oh man, he worked for years and drove the old blue one. I don't even remember what year it was, but it was early 70s for years and years. And boy, when he got that new pickup, oh, he was over the moon happy. Just, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread. And we got the crew shut down and got a call. Oh, the cows are out in the blueberry patch. Okay, everybody get in the back of the pickup. And we all go over to the blueberry patch, and we got to chase them in the pasture behind the blueberry patch. And Dad was doing his usual thinking, honking the horn, flashing the lights. Everybody else was out running this way and that. And we had Holsteins, and they weren't little Holsteins. Grandpa'd go get dairy cattle, the steers, and raise them up because they were cheap. And he'd only butcher one when the freezer got low. So some of these things lived 3, 4, 5 years. The butcher would tell us every time he'd come butcher one, boy, it's been a while since I've cut one up this big. These things are monsters. Well, Dad was chasing the cows, and by golly, one of them saw this light at the end of the tunnel. That was a pickup headlight. And he came and he smacked that pickup right in the headlight, and buckled the hood, buckled the fender. He couldn't open the door. Oh, Dad was beside himself. Oh, my goodness. That was the end of the world. That was definitely the next steer that got butchered. And I don't think it took very long to get him butchered either. Dad didn't tell us boys a whole lot. He wasn't great on communication as far as this is how you live and this is how you do things. But whoa, talk about an excellent example in life. He, all the rough characters we worked around over the years, with the farm and the farmhands coming and going and so on and so forth. You know, I think I've heard Dad cuss one time. Just a clean, living soul. He was an excellent example to us boys. Couldn't ask for better. He did things he didn't necessarily like to do. I know when he was younger, he went hunting, and then he got out of it because he was liking farming. He was passionate about farming. But when I got old enough and he knew I liked to go hunting, he took me elk hunting every year. And looking back, that was something, because it was pretty hard to get him to take a week off of work to do anything. Later in life, when he started traveling with Mom more and more, and it was good to watch him enjoy that. And going to South America and the Panama Canal and Peru, right? Yep. It was good to see him take time to do that. And after he got sick, seeing him slow down and take time, I'll tell on him a little bit. He used to tell us boys when we drive through shed, and it was lunchtime, and all the farmers were parked at the restaurant. He says, you see those guys parked there? They just need to be out working. You won't ever catch me doing that. Well, guess what? Towards the end of his life, when he decided it's time to slow down a little bit, you couldn't pry him out of that place. That was awfully good to see that even in his old age he could change and give up a little bit and enjoy himself. That's the important part. I miss him. There's not a couple of days go by that I don't wish I could say, hey, how do you do this? Or what do I do that there? But I certainly appreciate having him as my dad, teaching me what he's taught me. I think my brothers would agree with the same.
Thank you, Eric. I bet you anything the cheeseburgers that came from that steer that attacked the pickup tasted mighty good for him. Yeah, more than likely. Annie, come up and share about your dad, would you please? Okay. Anna Marie, talking about Papa John. Okay.
Okay, I'll try to get through this. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so my throat hasn't been the greatest lately, but I'm glad that you could all be here to honor my Uncle Jack and my dad, John. There are a lot of things that my dad taught us, being the oldest of four, myself and Ryan and Aaron, my sister Malia. One of the things he taught us was how to saddle a horse, how to read cattle EPDs, which strangely must have been horribly inaccurate for the Charolais breed during the 1980s and the 1990s, or he just simply ignored birth weights and calving ease, and that EPD column as it kind of leads into our next lesson that we all learned over and over again, which was how to properly put chains on a calf's legs and pull them while they were in utero, to correctly hook them up to the pulley and pull the calf. From probably age 8 on, I became the preferred assistant of my dad, as I was more joyful about going out into the freezing cold weather than my mother, and I was a little bit older and more experienced than my brothers. And I didn't mind being woken up at all hours of the night to go out and help pull calves. And we pulled a lot of Charolais calves growing up as kids. We all learned how to drive a stick shift pickup on our 83, something like that, half-ton baby blue Ford pickup. We learned how to set up a tent, even in the dark. We learned how to bait a hook, how to load, aim, and fire a gun, especially at all the gophers. Those were our most favorite targets that we had growing up there in Alberta. We learned how to pitch hay, how to stack round bales, and even how to stack and transport those round bales. Ryan, especially, was it you or Aaron that was hauling the load? And they were stacked a little high. He, too, had an underpass story like Uncle Jack, but he didn't get wedged under, but there was a big pile of straw left behind when he went under the overpass and took off the top row of bales, top strings off the bales. But he just kept driving and did not look back. We learned how to milk a cow, how to bottle feed a calf, how to graft a calf, and even thought out frozen newborn baby calves, because like Aunt Hum said, it was quite cold growing up at times during the winter. And I remember more than one instance where those baby calves were so cold that Mom and Dad would bring them in and put them in the bathtub and run hot water on them to warm them up. And us kids were thrilled and wanted to keep them in the house, but we were assured that they could only come in for a few hours, and then they had to go back out. But we got a few family photos that way, and that was always fun. We learned how to prepare our garden, how to space the plants, how to plant the seeds, weed, and harvest the garden. And then for whatever reason, my folks decided never to build a fence along that garden. So anytime that we had to move the cows, we had to guard it with our lives and trying to keep them out of the potatoes and the asparagus and the different produce, or fall was going to be rather lean if we let the cows run through all of our garden goods. He even taught one of his son-in-laws how to siphon fuel from a wrecked tank when it's negative 25 degrees Celsius with a 30-mile-per-hour wind blowing. I don't know how you convert that quite math-wise, but it's really, really cold. Luckily for me, the American son-in-law, my husband, he stuck it out and just kind of helped my dad finish that task there in Lethbridge that one time, and he stuck around in the family. My dad loved to go camping. He'd take the horses out to the Rocky Mountains. And I remember one particular time where he took us kids along, and we got to climb an old burned hillside on horseback. And because he wanted to show us where he had been elk hunting the fall previously. Unfortunately, this hill was so steep, it was almost like skiing, only in reverse. And we were pretty young kids. Our horses did not have shoes on, and they were heavily overweight. It was just supposed to be a quick little day trip. And we got stuck out in the mountains there. And so the key was we all had to get off our horses, and you held on to the tail of the horse in front of you and then onto the reins of your own horse. And my dad was at the lead, and so we had the 4 horses, and so we back and forth and just slowly climbed, and we'd turn, and luckily they were sure-footed horses, but they pulled us little kids up the hill. That was quite the trip for a lot of different reasons, but something that we have never forgotten, of course. One of the challenges for us kids growing up in Canada, of course, was the metric system. And, of course, my parents talked in Fahrenheit and pounds, but we had to do everything in degrees Celsius and centimeters and kilometers. And so trying to get help on our math assignments as kids, converting it from metric and degrees centigrade to pounds and inches in Fahrenheit, he tried, and our mom tried, and they attempted to teach us this, but none of us ever really mastered this. In fact, we became highly frustrated teens due to their attempts, and I think to this day none of us really enjoy math class very much. Other things that our father taught us, though, was things, more life lessons, like how to tithe, how to serve Jesus, how to put God first, and I remember tithing. Mom and Dad always had the envelopes on their dresser, and even when I don't know how they had the money to tithe, I know that they always, every Sunday, would put something in the offering plate at the church. And so that was really important to them, and they taught that to us. Probably one of my dad's last lessons that he taught us was how to return home across the border without taking the COVID test. We were very lucky that my mom had planned a camping trip, and some of our family, Ryan and his wife and kids, Malia and her husband, were supposed to come. And with COVID, they weren't able to. But my dad came anyways and caught a ride with Aaron in Missoula there. And so they came down. We met in northern Idaho in early June, and we spent a week together. And Rick and Meg came over with their families. And we had a great time together. And in going home, we were talking to Dad, and, well, Dad, how are you going to get back across the border? Oh, I don't know. I'm not worried about it. And we knew what kind of time he was going to be getting there. We're like, well, you have to do a COVID test, Dad, and they're going to be closed. The clinic will be closed in Shelby, Montana by the time you get there. Well, no, I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to drive home. Okay, we'll see you later. And so we left. A couple days later, I called him on the phone, and he answered, so he must have gotten home. And so, Dad, how did you get across the border? How'd that work? And so he got to the border, and they had stopped him, and so they, of course, wanted to see proof of his COVID test, which he did not have and had no intention of doing. And so they talked rounds and rounds for quite a while and explaining the rules. And to get back into Canada, he had to have proof of a negative test and everything. And so they gave him 2 options. He could drive on into Canada and go on to Calgary, which is about a 4-hour drive or so, and stay the night up there and then do the test and stay in quarantine for 2 days there at a special hotel in Calgary. Or he could turn around and go back down to Shelby, Montana and wait until the morning, and then he could get his test done there, and then once it was negative, and come back across the following morning. And he tried to explain, well, he already had a lot of expense if he went back to Shelby, his fuel and his hotel and his time, and that he needed to get back to the ranch. And he had a sympathetic border agent, but the rules were still the rules. And so Dad finally thought about it for a moment, and he said, well, okay, fine, I'll just go back down to Shelby. All right, Mr. Pimm, we'll see you later. See you in the morning, hopefully, with that negative test. So he said how he kind of lingered, took his time getting out into the pickup and let a lot of vehicles go by, 10, 15 other vehicles kind of go through, and hoping they might kind of just forget about him sitting there at the border. And he got in the pickup, and he starts the pickup up, and there's the open road. He just keeps going straight. And if he takes the left like the border agent told him to, and then another left, it would cross him back into the American side. He kind of looked around, and it's 8, 9 o'clock at night, and it's dark. He just drove, headed home. As soon as he got out of town, out of Coots there, he took the first left, the first gravel road to the left, and he just drove as fast as he could, and he made it on home. The border never called. Nobody ever followed up, But the next day, Debbie was a little worried, my stepmom. She had gone to town to get groceries, and she was coming back. And as she did, and they live, 15 miles or so out of town. It's fairly rural out there. And as she did, pulling off the gravel road back onto the highway, which there's really nobody that drives out there except if you're one of the 8 or 10 farm families that live out there, there was a RCMP, a sheriff's car, basically. And she thought, oh, no. They've been to the ranch. They picked up John. Oh, no, he's not going to, oh, dear. And so she was pretty stressed. She couldn't tell if there was somebody in the back seat or not when she passed him, but why would they be out there? And so she was fretting, and so she got up to the ranch and got in the door, and there's Dad sitting in his chair. So the RCMP wasn't here. Nope, I haven't heard from anybody. So that's how he got across the border without taking the COVID test in June. And that served as a great comfort to Aaron and I, who live here down in the States. We did have the opportunity to go see my dad in August prior to his passing. We knew his health was not well, and so we knew it was possible to get across the border. So we didn't quite pull the same antics that he did, but we did get across to see my dad before he passed. We didn't make it a second time for the funeral, but we did make it across to see him. So that was good, and he was kind of our inspiration on how to cross there, and we knew it could be done. So the list of skills and attributes that he taught us and instilled in us made for the incredible childhood, and I'd say he was successful in his teachings. We're still alive. We're employed, we're tax-paying, and God-fearing citizens with minimal addictions, and only one of us has spent just one night in jail. I'll let you guess which one. Most importantly, he taught us to serve Jesus, to love one another, to work hard, and to take care of our responsibilities, and to always, always close the gate behind us. So, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Manny. I didn't realize I was related to international criminals. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up here in a little bit. Not quite yet, but we've heard the differences between these two brothers. One most at home on a tractor, the other most at home on a horse. One more verbal, the other more reserved, and whatnot. And sometimes you wonder if they're really related or not. And there's all those oddities between them. But also there was the things that they were so alike, and that matter of faith was so important to both of them. Both of these gentlemen were aware of their impending death, and both of them were aware of the promises of God in Christ Jesus, and both of them were able to pass into the eternal arms of Jesus in calmness and peace, knowing the promises and resting upon those promises. The ultimate faith, I think, is to face one's death with strength and courage. And that is a tremendous amount of freedom. If you are free to die, then you are free to live and free to celebrate the life that God has given you. Comes this time, one of my favorite passages is from the book of 1 Thessalonians, the 4th chapter. The words of Paul. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about those who have died, so that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have died. For this we declare to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will by no means precede those who have died. For the Lord himself, with a cry of command, with the archangel's call and the sound of God's trumpet, will descend from heaven, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up in the clouds together with them, to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. Live in a little town of Port Angeles, Washington. Been there almost 30 years now, and I've served as one of the volunteer chaplains for the fire department, sheriff's department, police department. We often get called into homes where there's what they call an unattended death. That means there's been a death and no medical personnel have been present at the time. And some of those deaths are tragic and surprised. Some of them are expected. But it didn't take long before I could tell when I walked through the door of that home to comfort the family, whether that was a family where faith was important or not. When there was no faith, there was a raw pain that you could sense as you walk through the door, and the people are so upset and distraught they don't know what to do. There could be a death in a home where the people were used to faith and of faith and any number of different traditions of faith. But when you walked in, there was pain, but there was also understanding. And there was a little bit of hope that made such the difference in there. And they knew that the pain would be temporary and that God would take care of the future and take care of the one that they had just lost. So Paul says, I would not have you grieve as others do who have no hope. He didn't say you're not going to grieve when there is loss, but he said there's a big difference between those who have the hope of Jesus and those who have no hope at all. We come from a number of different faiths and traditions of Christianity, etc., here this day. But the one thing we need to realize together is that we are all creatures of the same God. We are all children of the same God who loves so much that he took the great joy of creation and says, they are good, this is very good. And he says, I'm going to prove it by sending Jesus to convince people of how much they are loved and how secure they are in God's love. So we count on those things together. Good old Apostle John says, perfect love casts out fear. And that makes such a difference, such a difference. We may have differences in our titles, but we remember that God is love and Jesus saves. Therefore, says Paul, encourage one another with these words. Take that encouragement with you this day, please. Now we're going to close in prayer here a little bit, and then there's going to be one final piece of music, High on the Mountain. And then the ushers will take care of ushering us out, so please just stay seated until they say, now it's your turn. And then we'll go down, we'll have some fellowship time together and continue talking and share those stories and just let the blessings of God continue. Let's close in prayer. As we leave the sanctuary now, dear God, we know that you go with us. And we know there's going to be some pain with memories and things, and we're going to miss Jack and John. There's going to be moments that the grief kind of creeps up on us unexpectedly. But we also know that you're aware of this, you've got them secure, and you hold them for us. Thank you for the fellowship that binds us all together in support and keeps us in your love as your Spirit pulls us together and gives us that bright, bright future. We thank you in Jesus. Amen. High on the mountain.
I know your life on earth was troubled, and only you could know the pain. You weren't afraid to face the devil. You were no stranger to the rain. Go rest high on that mountain. Son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven a shouting, love for the Father and the Son. Oh, how we cried the day you left us. We gathered round your grave to grieve. I wish I could see the angel faces when they hear your sweet voice sing. Go rest high on that mountain. Son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven a shouting, love for the Father and the Son. Go rest high on that mountain. Son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven a shouting, love for the Father and the Son. Go to heaven a shouting, love for the Father and the Son. Love for the Father and the Son.